Let me start off today with a question for you. Would you rather be, if you had to choose between the two, would you rather be first or would you rather be last? Let me give you a practical example of this. My wife and I, we've been traveling a lot. We've been flying a lot, and we fly Southwest. And here's the way the Southwest works. You don't have an assigned seat. You go in boarding groups, and so you want to be like in the front. You want to be first because you get to pick your favorite seat. I tried to get on first so I can get my emergency exit row where I have lots of legroom. I want to be first. Now, Pastor Eric today is going to be talking about Christ's heart for those in first place. If that intrigues you, I encourage you to stick around. Thank you for being here today, and welcome to SMCC Online.
Hey, well, good morning again. It's good to be with you. I'm Eric, one of the pastors here. Welcome to everybody watching online today, our online community. Glad to be with you. And welcome to everybody in Draper this morning. I started this series with you, and I wanted to wrap it up with you today, but I couldn't be here in person because I am down in Lehigh. They are celebrating their 7-year anniversary, and that is something to be excited about because if you attend Draper, you are a part of that story, collectively, and many of you individually. So I'm grateful for how our church has supported the Lehigh campus for the last 7 years. It's a great celebration today. I hope that excites you. Now, as I have looked over my life, I've noticed that there's this trend that has followed me around like a shadow. There's this theme that has shown up throughout my life in many places of my life, and it's this. I have had, and in many ways still do have, a deep desire to be first. I remember back in school, in the classroom, I wanted to be the first one done with the assignments, and I wanted to be the first one in line for recess. I wanted to score the most goals on hockey day in PE so that my team could be first. I had this desire, I still do in many ways, to be first. Even a few months ago, Pastor Trevor and I, we were on a run in St. George, and each mile got faster and faster than the one before. We kept pushing each other. We are a little bit competitive. And although the run didn't matter very much, coming in first and not being in last, it mattered just a little bit. Now, this is a safe place to be vulnerable, right? Here's the thing. I am a recovering performance junkie, a recovering success addict, a recovering approval-aholic. But here's what I've noticed. Enough about me. Let's talk about all of us for just a moment. If you want to take notes, I'd love for you to write this down. Everyone has an understanding of what it means to be first. Every person and every culture has beliefs about what it means to be first or what it means to be in first place. And to be first, simply, it's really just describing a person who is better than other people. A person who's a bit of a perfectionist. They look perfect, at least to everybody else. The person who gets all the accolades, the person who has it going on, the person who is enough, the person who is better than others, and they know it, and they want others to know it too. It's really this idea of being first or being in first place. Now, across our country, in different states have a different understanding of what it means to be first or in first place. And Utah is no exception. So over the last few weeks, I've been talking to a lot of people, and I've put together a list of some common ideas of what it means to be first in the Beehive State. Now, I'm not trying to get up at anybody's face today. I'm not trying to offend today. I just want us to be aware of what it looks like to be first inside of the culture that we live in, Utah culture. So this list is not authoritative. It's not meant to hurt anybody's feelings. And I'm not trying to be judgmental today. I just want us to be aware of what our culture hangs on to and values, what our culture looks at as first place today. So here are some common ideas. I made up a list. Here they are, common ideas of first in Utah culture. Number one, an entrepreneur mentality. People in First in Utah, they're starting things and they're growing things and they are going somewhere. There's an entrepreneur mentality that exists. And people in First, they have that mentality. Here's the second one, common ideas of First. Wealth or the appearance of. People in First in Utah, they have a lot of toys. They drive a lot of big, shiny things. They take wonderful vacations to wonderful places, or at least they want to look like they're doing all of that. It's a common idea of First. Here's another one. Supernatural blessing. People in First in Utah, they have a connection to God and He's blessing them, and that's why their life looks so successful. That's why they're in first place after all. It's because He has supernaturally blessed them. Here's another common idea of First in Utah. Familial perfection. People in Utah, they have a wonderful family. Oh, this perfect family. It looks so good on the outside, and everybody's working so hard to keep the appearance up. Another common idea of First in our state. Power over people. People in Utah have power over other people, and in some ways they think they're entitled to it. And the more power you have over people, the more powerful you are, and then you really are in first place. The last one, here we go, an influential popularity. People in First in Utah have lots of influence. They have lots of popularity. Now, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings today. I just want us to be aware of what it means to be first where we live. Now, these qualities, don't mistake what I'm saying. They're not all bad. There are some good and healthy things inside of each of these categories, I think. But there is also this, an ugly underbelly as well. Now, here's the other thing. On the other side of this conversation, I want you to know this. Everyone has an understanding of what it means to be last. And so I put together a list of common ideas of what it means to be last or less than or average, mediocre. Here's that list. The first is submission. If you follow another, if you sit under another, if you respect another, you allow another to guide you or hold you accountable, and that's somehow weak. Another common idea of last would be this, mediocrity. If you're average, that's not good enough. If you're boring, you're less than. Another idea of last, humility. If you lift up on others and honor others and celebrate others and share credit with others, somehow you're taking away from your pace to first place, you know? Here's another one, patience. If you go slow or at the speed of another, you're not moving forward fast enough. Come on, accelerate your pace in life. And the fifth common idea of last is anonymity. If you aren't well known, if you aren't highly influential, or if you live a simple life, then who should really care about your life anyways? So everyone has an understanding of what it means to be first, and everyone has an understanding of what it means to be last. And as you begin to relate with these categories, as you begin to connect with them, I want to read to you something that stopped me dead in my tracks the first time I read it. I'm going to read to you a line. I'm going to keep it anonymous. I'm going to let you know who said it. Look at this. But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. What if you spent your life thinking that you were in first place? Or, hey, at least in the top 10%. What if you spent your whole life thinking you were ahead of most people only to get to the end of your life and realize that's not what counted anyways? To spend your whole life thinking you were first only to discover you were last. Wouldn't you want to know? I'd want to know. And wouldn't we want to course correct if that were the case? Now, do you know who said this? Let me read it to you one more time. Then I'll attribute it to the person who said it. But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. Jesus of Nazareth. So here's what I really need you to know. Here's where we're going today. Here's what I'm convinced of. Here's what I believe deep down will make the world a better place and your world a better place. It is this. Jesus Christ's idea of first and last should come first. It should come first for each of us in our lives. And his idea of first, it is just different than ours. And his idea of last, it is just different than ours. And if we're gonna live under the banner of Jesus, we need to rethink our understanding of what it means to be first and what it means to be last. Because Jesus's idea of first, it is absolutely best. So this is part 5, the fifth and final part of a series called The Banner of Jesus. We've been studying what Jesus is really like together and what it means to live under his banner. A banner or a flag was really a symbol of authority or identity. And if you fly a flag in your yard or you fly a flag from your home, it says something about your core values, something about your core beliefs. And so we've been talking about what would it mean to fly the flag of Jesus in the yard of our lives, fly his flag in our lives, salute his flag in our lives, honor it every day, every step of the way. What would it look like? That's what this series has been about. So we've covered 4 things up until today. We've looked at the heart of Christ for the hurting, the discouraged, the excluded, and the confused. And if you're in Draper and you were here last week, Pastor Nick did a great job talking about the heart of Christ for the doubting and the confused. And today we're going to build on that. See, the heart of Christ in those 4 categories is that he is gentle and he is lowly. Gentle and lowly. He's connected to those people. And those first 4 weeks of this series, they have connected with a lot of you. I've talked to you about this. You've talked to me about this. It's really connected. But there's a group of people, I think, that topic, that context, that conversation hasn't connected with. And here's why. Perhaps you've not found yourself in those categories. You have not found yourself down. You have not found yourself down and out in life. Perhaps your story is different. I mean, you've been in first place for as long as you can remember. You've been running at the top of the pack. You've been leading the race for as long as you can remember, and all that stuff's not really connected with you. And if that's you, I want you to know the heart of Christ for those in first place. See, some of us don't have a down and out story. We have an up and out story. And Jesus challenges people who are first in life to rethink what that means anyways. And so today I want to take you into that conversation so that you can see the heart of Christ for those in first place. Now, to do that, as we kind of begin the conversation, I want us to start in the Old Testament. I want us to start in the book of Isaiah, because Isaiah once said something to a group of people who were sort of disconnected from God and going their own way. They had their own definitions of what was most important in life, and they had their own behaviors around what was most important. And Isaiah would write to them to challenge them and to help them see something very important. In Isaiah chapter 55, we see this. Seek the Lord, starting in verse 6. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake their ways and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them turn to the Lord and he will have mercy on them. And to our God, for he will freely pardon. This next part I really want you to see. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. I mean, that is pretty clear. And I don't have time to break down the entire passage, but I want you to know this. God's understanding of what is first is completely different than what ours typically is. The currency in his kingdom is different. The economy in his kingdom is different. The approach, the relationships, the things that are most important, they are just different. His ways, they are not our ways. And when I say our, I'm talking about the way of humanity, the way of culture. The culture that we grow up in, the culture that we live in now. So here's what this means. What's good and what's bad and what's beautiful and what's ugly and what should be valued and celebrated and rejected and judged and upheld and what should continue, it is just different in God's kingdom. It is just different. The way to the good life, the way to first place, the way to live a life that counts, it is just different when it comes to living life God's way. So for example, we hear this. Here's one way. Just follow your heart. God's way is different. Your heart is wicked. Do not follow it. It needs to be renewed, restored, brought back to life. We need a new heart, in fact. Here's another example. It's common to hear this. Morality, it is just subjective. It's up to what you feel is best. But the way of God is this. Morality is objective. It's based in the object of his character. God's ways, they are just different. The rules of engagement are different. Now, Carissa and I, we come from 2 very different families. The way of her family and the way of my family, they are very different. In some ways, they're opposite. And I bet there's some couples out there listening, and this describes you. For example, in Carissa's family, they like to stay up late. They like to play cards and board games, sipping on coffee, and eating delectable chocolate. My family, completely different. They like to go to bed early after having too much to drink and pounding a package of Oreos. I mean, the families, it's just different. In my family, we plan way out in advance. We've played 18 holes by noon. In her family, they're still trying to figure out what to have for breakfast by noon. The families, they are just so different. See, when it comes to academic systems and sports, and when it comes to even driving laws, different cultures and different groups of people, they see it differently. And sometimes one is better than the other, sometimes it's just different. But here's what I want you to know. When it comes to God, an infinite, perfect, holy, good, and loving creator, and when it comes to us, finite, flawed, sinful, broken creation, his ways, they are just always, always, always so much better. Pastor and author Rich Villodas from New York said something recently over Twitter that I screenshotted because I knew it would come up and it'd be so helpful for us here in Utah at some point. I want to read to you what he said. I was gripped by it. He says, "It's possible to have a life that doesn't appear fruitful to the world. It's possible to live a life that doesn't look like it's in first place or the top 10. It doesn't look like a life that's fruitful to the world, but is faithful to God. It is possible to live a life that the world would say doesn't look fruitful, doesn't look powerful, doesn't look significant, looks maybe boring or mediocre or average, and yet it's an incredibly faithful life to God. This is the foolishness of the cross. The cross looks like failure, but is the greatest act of faithfulness, which has led to incalculable fruitfulness." Let me ask you a pretty direct question. Is it possible that your ideas of first and last are wrong? What would it take you to come to that place where you discover God's ways are better than yours? What would it take for you to get there? To agree with God that his ways of first should come first in your life. Now, I've met a lot of people who have come to that place, and I've discovered there are really two ways to get there, two paths to get to a place where you say, God's ways are better than mine. Let me tell you about those two paths. The first is pretty simple. Truth confronts you, and you decide that his ways are better. You read something in the Bible, you look at a passage of scripture, and you decide, you know what? It all makes sense. His ways are better than mine. I'm going to reorient my understanding and my definition of first around his. But there's another way. For some people a bit like me, they are too stubborn and too hard-hearted to learn through truth. They have to learn through experience. And so I meet a lot of people who hit rock bottom first. They go their way for so long. Eventually they fall flat on their face and they discover, I guess my way isn't the best way after all. I guess my way to first has left me last, and I'm done with that. There are two ways to discover you need to change your understanding of your ways as the best way. Which way might you go? Now, here's the thing. If you decide to define first the way that God does, and we're going to get to how he does in just a little bit, don't be surprised if this happens. If other people around you who define first the good life, the valuable life differently, begin to look at your life and say things about it. They might begin to mock it or shame it or condemn it or challenge it. This is what's at stake. If you decide to define first the way God does, those who don't define first that way might challenge this new way of living. I've seen it happen many times. This is what's at stake. So what is that first way for God? What is first to him? Well, here's what I want to do. I want to go back to the passage that we read from earlier, that quote from Jesus about many who are first will be last and many who are last will be first. I want to share with you the fuller context. The fuller context of the conversation is that it was started by a man who truly wasn't first in the first century. He was first in his religious community. I mean, he was incredibly righteous. He was incredibly devoted. He was a religious devotee that was at the first of the line. He made some others look bad. He was incredibly religious, but he was first financially as well. He was very wealthy. He was first in terms of power and prestige. He was first in terms of the accolades that would come his way. Inside of his culture, he truly was in first place. And he comes to Jesus and he has a conversation. And the conversation is in Matthew chapter 19. And in Matthew chapter 19, the conversation, it really unfolds like this. Just then, a man came up to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life?" He says, you know what, I'm in first, but I got to stay in first. So Jesus, you're a new rabbi on the scene. What's the next good thing I must do? I mean, this guy, he was first, financially first in terms of influence and prestige, first in terms of religion. He would have made a good Utahn. He says, Jesus, you're a new rabbi. What other things should I add to my plate so I can be type A in that area too? Jesus says this, why do you ask me about what is good? He's like, your definition of good, it's backwards to begin with. Jesus replied, there's only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments. And this guy probably gets excited. You see his face light up because he's been in first place with his commandment keeping for a long time inside of his religion. Which ones, he inquired. Jesus replied, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself. Going back to the Old Testament, Jesus repeats that. Look at his answer. All these I have kept, the young man said, but what do I still lack? He's like, I've done it, checked it off. Jesus, I'm in first. Jesus answered, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. Go sell what you have. Look what happens. When the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had great wealth. He had great wealth. I want to come back and unpack this in just a sec, but I want to continue through the passage. Then Jesus said to his disciples, so he turns to the guys that are with him, he turns to his followers, truly I tell you, it's hard for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. And when the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and asked, who then can be saved? I mean, they had this understanding that if you were wealthy, you were already saved as evidenced by your wealth. Your salvation translates to blessing, and that blessing is wealth, right? That's their understanding. And Jesus said to them, truly, I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man, this is him talking about himself, sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. I love this scene from the life of Jesus, and in many ways it challenges me. This rich young man, he went away sad because he had great wealth. Why? He was not yet ready to reorient his definitions of the good life, of first and last, around Jesus's approach. See, Jesus makes an incredible point about wealth here. And he's not saying that wealth is a bad thing. He's saying that if wealth is your first thing, it will be very hard for you to bow the knee to Jesus and make him first because there is something else already in that seat. That's the point he is making. So this man went away sad because he knew that if he was going to make God first in his life, he would have to make a decision about the thing that was already first in his life. And it seems that the man wasn't really ready to reorient his life around Jesus anyways. And this is a strong point for each of us. Because for each of us, there's a default setting in us about what first means. Because remember, everyone has an understanding of first. And Jesus is saying, if I'm going to be the most important thing, whatever is there already needs to be removed so that I can take the place. And so that's the challenge to the man. It's a challenge to each of us. But there's also a challenge and an invitation to the disciples as well. Because they're thinking, Jesus, your definition of first, your definition of influence, it's an impact. It's so outside of what we understand. I mean, Jesus, what will we get for following after you? I mean, we've left all of this. What are we going to get? And Jesus goes on to make an incredible point. He talks about it in a few specific first century ways, but he's basically saying this. All that you want will eventually be yours, but it's just not yet. He's making this point that in the future, the joy that you are truly after, it will be yours when you see the impact of your life into eternity. And when you step into eternity and experience eternal life, which is a now and not yet thing, you will discover how your life counted for something. And when you see how your life counted, that will be your reward, and it'll all be worth it. This is the point that Jesus is making to his followers. Now, my guess is that this didn't sit very well with them because in Mark, there's another conversation where the disciples are really squabbling a bit like kindergartners about who's most important and who's in first place, you know? Reminds me of me back in the day trying to be first. In Mark chapter 10, there's this conversation about who's going to be most important, who's going to be in first place. in the future. And here's how Jesus responds to the squabbling of his disciples. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. James and John are fighting about who's in first place, essentially. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. But not so with you. In my kingdom, in my culture, there's a different way to approach influence and power. There's a top-down approach where authority looks down and says, I'm over you. But there's another way. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great, if you want to be great, if you want to be in first place, you guys, if you want to be so significant, do you know what you need to become? Here it is. You must be a servant. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. Guys, you want to be first? Let me tell you what first looks like to me. Slave of all. The one ready to be served. Ready to serve. The one ready to be treated as a servant at times. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Jesus has done this himself, and to give his life as a ransom for many. It's the world's idea of first, as Jesus talks about the Gentiles' approach to first, that leads with power and might and authority from on high. But in the Jesus community, it's going to be different. The way forward is back, the way up is down, the way to greatness is through service. And Jesus, he really brings up what he's going to do on the cross at this point. Jesus lived this out. He has served the whole world, laying his life down. See, one of the reasons we push back about this idea of humility and letting others go first in front of us in the line of life is we think if I don't look out for me, no one will, so I'm going to get out in front. And Jesus is saying, I already looked out for you. I already took care of you. I already have valued you. I've already placed you in front of me in the line of life. It happened when I died on the cross. That's it. Jesus saying, I've done this for you. You can do this for others. So I just want you to write down two quick thoughts here as we begin to put this all together. The first is this: it's better to rule with Christ later than to rule on your own now. Jesus brings up this real unique passage back in Matthew, this unique concept that someday they will lead, they will rule with him. And it'll be ruling through serving. Rather than trying to rule over as many people as possible now, Jesus says, you know what, serve now. You'll lead with me later. And it's better to serve with Christ now than be served by others. Greatness to Jesus is about service. This is his definition of first. If you want to be first, you need to be last. You need to be a servant of all. One of my favorite shows of all time is the show The Office. I bet there's some Office fans listening today. And one of my favorite episodes of The Office is where they have Office Olympics. I don't know if you remember this episode, but they're bored and the boss is gone. And so they decide to create some sports around the office, Office Olympics. These sports really mean nothing, but they're fun. And then they create these medals out of yogurt lids. And they start giving away these medals. And the medals mean nothing and the sports mean nothing, but it's a bit fun to watch and it occupies their time. I'm concerned that someday we will show God all of our medals that we have for being first in our cul-de-sac, first in the neighborhood, first at work, first because of the school our kids went to, first because of some other thing that was important to us. And God will say, that's not how I evaluate what really matters. That's not how I evaluate and define first place. And we'll say, God, here are the medals that we have for you. And he'll say, that's not how I defined greatness to begin with. And I think there are other people whose lives we might be tempted to look at and say, their lives aren't that powerful, not that significant, a little boring, a little mediocre, kind of average, humble, people who live a quiet life. And God will say to them, well done, good and faithful servant. Because although their lives didn't look fruitful to many, their life was incredibly fruitful to God. They understood what it meant to live under the banner of Jesus as someone who was okay being last, according to the way the world talks about it. And they were ready to serve. And they understood what really mattered to God. And they went for it. And talking about being a servant, it sounds great until someone treats you as a servant. And then it's a bit more difficult. But Jesus was inviting the man into humility. He's inviting us into humility as well. Because if you think you are better than somebody else, it will be very hard for you to serve them because you think they should probably be serving you. And we would never say that out loud, but subconsciously, perhaps we act that way. So the big truth today that I want us to understand is this. Don't trade being first for living a life that honors God first. That's a bad trade. I don't want any one of us to get to the end of our lives thinking we were first only to discover we were actually last. What I want for us to do is be faithful to God now, even if to others they might say that life doesn't look that impressive or valuable. You're kind of towards the end. You're kind of towards the last inside a culture. But to God, it's prioritizing Him first. And that's a faithful way to live life. And so here's the thing we want to do at SMCC. We want to serve you as you take your next step to serve others. We want to make it incredibly easy for you to take your next step towards stepping back in the lines of life to serve others and place others ahead of yourself. We want to help you live this out, to redefine your understanding of first with Jesus's. And here's how that happens for us. It happens through volunteering. We have wonderful ways for you to volunteer outside the walls of our church through our ministry partners, which you're going to hear more about in our next Vision series, starts next week, and inside the walls of our church on ministry teams. And I just want you to know there are people who are living this out every week in and week out, and you might not know it. But let me tell you where I see it very clearly. I want to celebrate these people. I want to celebrate the volunteers in kids ministry and student ministry. And here's why. If you want to live this out, if you want to take a step back in the line of life and put other people first, living out humility, living out service, you know how you could do that? By prioritizing a fourth grader in your schedule. People who show up in fusion ministry, 4th and 5th grade, and kids ministry, they're setting their alarm, they're getting here early, they're wearing the kids' shirt. They're saying 4th graders are more important than me. I'm here to serve the next generation. I love that. How about student ministry? There are adults who take vacation time from their jobs to hang out with stinky middle schoolers at summer camp because they're saying that middle schooler, they are first. They come before me in the line of life. I'm last. I'm putting them first. You guys, this church is built on volunteers who are fully engaged, who serve the guests, who serve those that culture might look at and say, someday they'll be important. And you say they're important right now. If you haven't taken a next step to volunteer, you should do that today. Because when you do, you will be embracing Jesus' idea of first and last. You'll be saying, I'm putting someone else before me in this line of life. Because Jesus, I see greatness as service. Because Jesus, you see greatness as service. I want to live under your banner, define first and last the way that you do. Your ways are different than mine. Your ways are best. I will serve right now. You can head to the info booth in the lobby, the new here table in the lobby, and you can make that happen today and live out this principle that many who are first will be last, and many who are last living as servants, well, they're going to be first. So here's the bottom line of today's message. Jesus will humble us before Him later, or we can humble ourselves before Him now. The reason the story of the rich man is included is to get us thinking about whether we will go away sad because we like what's in first place, or whether we will go away and humble ourselves and define first the way that Jesus actually does. The heart of Christ for those in first place is that they would leverage their gifts for His kingdom, not theirs. So for the last 5 weeks, we've learned what it looks like to live under the banner of Jesus. And I hope that every day from here on out, you will do just that. It will make our world a better place. It will make your world a better place. It will make this community a better place. Let's continue to be a church that lives under the banner of Jesus. Would you pray with me? God, I'm grateful for every volunteer who has placed someone else first, ahead of them in life. Jesus, I pray that for those of us who are driven towards success and driven to perform, that we would take that drive and channel it in a way that would build your kingdom. Jesus, help us define first and last the way that you do. That includes a lot of things because your ways are better than ours, but help us today start with defining it by service. Jesus, in Mark 10, that's how you describe greatness. Greatness is service. Help us be a great group of people because we've decided to serve other people. And ultimately, Jesus, we want to say thank you for serving us through your death and resurrection. God, I pray we would continue to be a church that lives under your banner, and that would be good for the world, and that would be good for us as we discover devotion and delight go together. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
I count on one thing, the same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. He's working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh, yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy. All my days, oh, yes, I will. Same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley.
Thank you, Christine, the band, for leading us in that song, reminding us of the truth of just responding to that message that we just heard from Eric of, yes, I will. I'll take a next step that says, yeah, how do I kind of orient my life around not necessarily having to be first, but maybe humbling myself and being last and serving others. Now, 3 quick things before I let you go. Just give me 30 seconds here, all right? First off, if you haven't subscribed to us yet on YouTube, please do that. We want to reach as many people as possible and help them take their next step in full devotion and full delight in Jesus Christ. One free way that you can do that is just by subscribing. If you've already subscribed, then just hit the like button on this video. That helps us reach more people. If you would like to find community, this is thing number 2. If you'd like to find community and learn how to love God and love others better, we have a small group that is 100% online. online. And you can sign up or even just ask for more information about the online small group by going to smccutah.org/online small group. Again, smccutah.org/online small group. And it takes you 30 seconds to fill out that form, and I'll personally reach out to you, get you more information about that. Thirdly, I really just want to invite you to come to one of our physical locations this next weekend. We are starting a vision series, 3-week-long vision series about our vision for the future as an organization, as a church. And this is a great series to be at one of our physical locations. So I want to invite you to do that. Again, we're starting a new series next week. Pastor Eric's going to be walking us through that series. You're going to really enjoy it, get something hopeful and helpful out of it. And I'd love to see you at one of our locations. Take care. Have a great week.